3, 2, and 1. We're getting ready for UFC 108, and Kevin Iole from YAHOO is here with us. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Steve. Feeling a little better finally.
Yeah, I think we're all catching the cold here in Vegas, but I think you caught it writing all those stories about Mayweather and Pacquiao. That'll make you sick, right?
Yeah, it really did. It made me sick of thinking about it, sick of talking about it. And, I said Sam Stott when he got up on the scale, he looked so good today that if Mayweather saw him, he'd probably request him to be tested.
Right. He's going to check on everybody. All right, let's go through the first theme of the whole card are the injuries. It's been unreal. And you know what? In the end, though, it actually turned out to be a pretty good card in terms of the matchups. You don't have huge names, but I'm telling you, there's guys on this card who can fight, and there's a lot of even matches.
Well, I think, really at the end of the day, what you want to see is you want to see matches where guys are competitive with each other, and it's not a blowout where, one or two punches ends the fight. One guy just beats the other one down. And I think we have a lot of even fights like that. I mean, everybody gets excited when you have the marquee names and the big fights like Brock Lesnar on the card. But, I think this card, you got to give Joe Silva a lot of credit. He put together a pretty doggone good card, given, albeit without a lot of big names, given the, unbelievable restraints he had.
Yep. Well, and what he had to do, too, is take some chances on certain fighters. I think they're actually taking a little bit of a chance on Gilbert Ivel, and not because of his sordid past and his transgressions. He's actually a dangerous fighter, and they've groomed Dos Santos. Right. He's in line for a title. This guy is a very good stand-up fighter he's going against.
He is, and last time he didn't look very good, but he fought Josh Barnett, and so certainly you can understand why against a grappler like Josh Barnett that he might not look great. I think it's an interesting fight. I think Dos Santos is a cut above Gilbert Ivel though, and I think it'll go back and forth. I think Dos Santos has a pretty good chin, and I think he'll end up knocking out Gilbert Ivel. I think it's going to be a tough fight. There are going to be some anxious moments for both guys, but I think Dos Santos will catch the fight.
Okay. So you had 8 guys go off the card over the last 6 weeks. One of the guys, it is 11 total. Okay, so 11 total. One of the guys who's back though, who's been injured the entire year essentially with an ACL tear, is Joe Lauzon. Very highly touted prospect, and I think a lot of people have forgotten about him in the lightweight ranks.
He is a really well-rounded fighter, and I think he's a guy that, they pushed him a little bit against Kenny Florian. He wasn't ready for that challenge. Had a couple of wins after that, and then he got injured. But I think Joe, this is a big fight for Joe fighting Sam Stout. I think it's going to be a real interesting fight. I like Joe in the fight because I think he's a little bit more of a complete all-around fighter. But Sam Stout was in great shape out there, and he can throw, and he likes to throw.
Absolutely. Another fight that came together kind of last minute, and guys got moved all over the card, but Paul Daley and Dustin Hazlett, which is a great matchup because of the styles and because of the bravado and confidence of Paul Daley. He thinks he can knock out anybody, but he has shown holes in his game. Now, that was a while ago against Jake Shields, and Jake is great. Dustin Hazlett may not be, I don't go nuts, internet people, but Dustin Hazlett may not be that far behind in terms of pure grappling Jake Shields, so he has to stay off the ground.
Well, I think that Dustin Hazlett is a phenomenal submission fighter. I mean, just absolutely phenomenal. I expect him to win by submission. I think his submissions are better than Paul Daley's stand-up, his bottom line. That's, how it's going to come down. I understand they stand up on their feet, and Dustin doesn't really have that great a stand-up. Paul doesn't have that great on the ground. But I think when you look at that fight, you say, Dustin's stand-up is better than Paul's ground, and so his weakness, I think, won't be as glaring as Paul's. I think everybody, even the people who are picking Paul, think when it gets to the ground, it's over, and it's going to be over in favor of Dustin. Not that they think a back-and-forth war is going to favor Dustin Hazlett, but certainly they think that he can survive standing up for a while better than Semtex could on the ground.
Well, I'll give you the other reason that I like Hazlett in the fight is his approach. Too often we hear guys who have one strength say they're going to fight where the fight goes. He wants to strike with me, I'll strike with him. Hazlett has said repeatedly, I'm not striking with him. It's going to the ground. I'm winning by, least possible method of effort out there.
He understands his game very well, and he's a really interesting story. A kid that was bullied, picked on in school, considered suicide for a while because of how badly he was picked on. Learned jiu-jitsu, and it's really taken him places. But he's what I would call a true martial artist. You hear Frank Mir use that term all the time, and I think it really applies to Dustin Hazlett.
All right, main event. You got Rashad Evans, you got Thiago Silva. For some reason, maybe the buzz isn't there, and yet both guys are legit, top 7 guys at 205 pounds, in the UFC, and the winner probably should get that much closer to a potential rematch against Machida, or it looks like a fight against maybe Rampage Jackson.
I think it's because of the way the fight was placed. I mean, Thiago Silva's a really good striker. Obviously Rashad is a great striker. They've both won a lot of great fights. They've only lost to Machida. Then you have the angle about Jardine, where Rashad's best friend Keith Jardine was beaten by Thiago Silva, and then he points at him on the ground and kind of disdainfully dismisses him as he walks away, and Jardine is prone on his back in Portland. You would think that would have gotten a lot of attention, but I think what it was people were so shell-shocked by all the injuries, and this fight fell out. And there was at one point when we were going to see Lesnar and Carwin on this card, and there were so many changes, and I think it's hard to replace the kind of star power they had and make people satisfied. I think they'll be satisfied when they walk out, just like at 107. I heard a lot of complaints at 107 in Memphis. Oh, this card's terrible. You're doing this to Dana and everything else. And you know what? The fights, I think, all but maybe one fight, were great fights. And the one fight that wasn't great was good. I'm not saying that this card will match that. I'm not saying it's going to match UFC 95, which was another one of the best cards of the year that people were complaining about. But I think, Joe Silva's record's a lot better than the fans who complain.
That's a good point. And I'll guarantee you this. If you look at the 5 fights on the main card, I don't think any of them are going to go the distance. And that's what makes a good card. Right. These fights, matchup-wise, you've got sluggers, you've got guys who have different strengths. I don't think you're going to get a lay-and-pray slop fest for 3 rounds.
No, I don't see that either. And, hey, I don't mind a fight going to decision if it's a good back-and-forth fight, a lot of action, and it goes to a decision. But, with all the controversy over the judging and the way some of the decision fights go, hey, let's get them over with, and I think this card has that.
All right, we close with this. Pick an upset. You have all these fights to pick from. You got the Spike fights. You've got the main card fights. Give me an upset. I'll give you a quick one, and this is actually a pretty big one. In Vegas, it's plus 250. I think the guy's fought quality opponents. He's had, I think the last card he was supposed to be on was the one in Nashville, and he had a little testing issue, and that's Ryan Jensen against Mark Munoz. I like Mark Munoz, but I'll tell you from the odds, 330, minus 330 is a little high on a guy who has some holes in conditioning and his striking game. Who do you like as an upset?
I guess my upset I would take would be Jake Ellenberger. I just think Jake over Mike Pyle would be the one that that I would like, match up of former IFL fighters. But I think this is a card where you look at the favorites, and I think you're going to make some money if you play the chalk, and that's not always the case in UFC fights. But on this particular card, I think it is. That I would be willing to bet the vast majority of those guys on the right side of the page on the bout sheet come out ahead tomorrow night.
It's Kevin Iole. I'm Cofield. You can follow us on Fight Night on Yahoo and also up on Twitter. I know Kevin's going to be all over Twitter, and we'll have all the live fights, and then Kevin and Dave Meltzer will have all the great updates from UFC 108. We'll see you after the fights.